Hello everyone, welcome to week number 2 in Science 200, where we're learning everything about the scientific process. Before we move off of this slide, I just want to say I took this picture of a sea eagle in Scotland. That's about as close as you could ever get to one. I was on a boat while I took that photograph, and so it's kind of amazing. Went to Scotland for almost 2 weeks in May. Was amazing. All right, so last week you learned about the natural sciences and you learned about the different ones. Biology, of course I put that one first. Chemistry, physics, environmental science, astronomy. What did I leave out? I left out something. So anyway, what are the natural sciences? And from now on, you're going to learn about the scientific process. How does science work? And you learned about this in the 7th grade. I know you took some 7th grade science class, and they told you about the scientific process, right? You make a hypothesis, you design an experiment, you do the experiment, you come to some conclusion after you compile the results, and then that's it, right? No, that's not it. Science is much more complicated than that, and it takes you a long time to do all of this. Just saying that. Yeah, it takes a long time to do all of it. And to start with, you have to know a lot about your topic before you can even figure out a question to ask about it. And so you have to do a tremendous amount of background research before you can get started with any type of question. When you do the experiments, you do them over and over and over and over and over and over and over again to make sure that you are getting the same results every time, so that whatever this phenomenon is that you are looking at is really happening. Then you do compile your results, and it takes you a while to write up a journal article because, of course, you have to research everything, give credit where credit is due for all your sources because you have a ton of them. Put your data in the right format. Most of the time that's in the format of a graph. You have to come to a conclusion. You have to suggest the next questions that you would ask about this topic, and then you get your work published, which is not always easy either. You have to send your work into a journal, and the editor will say yay or nay on it, and usually it is no, it is not ready for publication, but here are some changes that you can make, and if you do that, then we will publish. That's usually what happens. Sometimes it's just a flat out no, and sometimes it's a yes, but that is very, very rare. And so you get your work published, and there it is out there for everybody to see, and you will get criticism if there's any to be had. Other people will start using your work. They'll start citing it, which is a good sign that everything went well with your work. And that's just one set of experiments right there. So that's how science actually works. Revision is terribly important. It's going to be very important this term too. So, for example, when I would write, I was writing a journal article, I would give it to everybody that I knew. And I would say, here, please read this. Give me critique on this. Here, 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 everybody. And my whole research group, everybody would have a copy of it, and they would look it over, and they would make corrections, and they would find errors. And yeah, I revised an awful lot. And everybody does, because you got to get it in the best shape that you possibly can in order to get it published. So revision is very important, but it will also be very important this term. So every week, your assignments, especially on your project, will build, and you'll add to it and add to it. And I will grade what you did last week, and I will give you feedback, and you can always revise that on your next go around when you turn it in for, say, during week 5. Your work from week 4 has been critiqued. I've given you feedback. You can fix that and turn it in week 5 with the additional information. So revision is really important in our class too. You also took a look at Alexander Fleming. Of course, me being a microbiologist, I loved this story because it's a great story. Alexander Fleming was a very famous microbiologist, And he discovered penicillin. And he did that after he came back from vacation and he was cleaning up a bunch of petri dishes. And he noticed that the bacteria were not growing in a zone around a mold that was on one of the plates. And he thought to himself, I know what that reminds me of. That's some kind of a growth inhibition that's going on. That fungus, that mold, is producing some kind of chemical that's preventing those bacteria from growing. I wonder what it is. So he isolated the chemical and he named it penicillin, and it was named after that particular species of mold, Penicillium notatum. And he just called this chemical that he had isolated penicillin. All right, that was the end of it for him. He checked that off. Okay, I found a chemical that inhibits the growth of bacteria. Well, other people were interested in this because they could see applications for it. Couldn't we use this in people? If it's not harmful to people, couldn't we use it in people to kill the bacteria that are causing an infection in them? And so other scientists ran with this idea. They tried to grow up lots and lots and lots of this mold to isolate enough of this penicillin to give to people. And eventually they figured out the right combination. They had to switch species of mold, but they did find one that worked better than Penicillium notatum. They had to figure out how to isolate enough of this chemical, penicillin, in order to concentrate it to give to people. But then they started using it, especially in World War II. And this prevented so many infections, post-surgical infections, shrapnel infections, skin infections, and all those soldiers came back from World War II and told all their family members and their friends that they had been given this miracle drug. And that began the age of antibiotics during that time. And I can bet each and every one of you has taken an antibiotic before. I know that I have. Antibiotics are chemicals that prevent the growth of bacteria or kill bacteria specifically, not viruses, not fungi, not anything else. All right, and then also you chose your research topic. And I saw a lot of this in your discussions for the discussion board this week. Some of you said you hadn't chosen yet, and I always asked you if I did see that to go ahead and choose, because you needed to choose from the list or choose from a good set of issues out there that have to do with natural sciences. So it would be a problem or an issue that is current now that everybody is interested in. And I hope that you did choose a good one or one from the list. If you chose one from the list, we know it's good. Okay, so let's see what we've got going on this week. This week, there's a lot of reading in your textbook this week. I will tell you that. And I find it absolutely interesting. I love all of this. I worked in public health for 11 years. I am a microbiologist. I was called an environmentalist when I worked in environmental health. So I'm familiar with all of this, and I love it so much. But it's a really good description of what happened in London, England, when there was an outbreak of cholera, and actually it became quite a big problem because thousands of people died from cholera. So what is cholera exactly? It's a bacterial infection. Now we know what it is. It's a bacterial infection caused by Vibrio cholerae, which is a species of bacteria, and it's transmitted by contaminated water. Okay, people back then in London didn't know that infections could be spread that way. They did understand that you needed clean water to drink. And they also understood that they had to find a way to get rid of all the sewage from all the people living in this big city. And so, unfortunately, what they decided to do was dump all that sewage in the Thames River. And that's where their water came from, too, that they drank. So anyway, they didn't understand all of this. They were starting to get clues about how things happened and the importance of getting rid of sewage. They didn't really treat it. They just dumped it. But anyway, and the importance of clean water. Now, they thought that infections mostly were spread by bad smells in the air, and that is miasma, which I have right there on the slide. Miasma is these bad smells that are in the air, and that's what they thought was causing infections. They did not believe that water could be contaminated and that you could get infections that way. And now, of course, we all know that that's true, or you can get it in food or from mosquito bites, lots and lots of ways. But they thought miasma was the reason that people got sick. You'd smell bad smells and that's not good, because now you're going to come down with an infection. So that's what miasma is. And that was the overarching idea in public health at that time about how people got infected. Well, John Snow came along, and he's a prominent figure in this particular chapter. And it discusses the way that he showed that contaminated water sources were the reason for the people getting sick with cholera. Okay, I forgot to explain exactly what cholera is. Cholera is a type of diarrheal disease, and it's horrific. The bacteria infect you and then cause your water, the water in your body, just to flow out. Of course, you have diarrhea to start with, but then it is literally just water coming out of your body. And at that stage, it's called rice water stool, because it's just sort of milky white looking water that's coming out of you. And you get dehydrated very, very quickly. The fastest cure for this is rehydration. So nobody understood this back then. But it is a terrible disease, and you can absolutely die from it in just a matter of days. And if you're talking about a tiny baby, that can happen in hours. So cholera was a terrible disease. So John Snow studied it. He studied the sewage lines. He studied the wells where people got their water. He mapped out all the cases of the diseases and the deaths also. He formed this whole map, and he showed clusters of diseases around wells where the water was contaminated by the Thames River. And the Thames River was where all the sewage was going. So he basically showed that it was unclean water that was transmitting the disease. And this totally changed public health. But it also shows you how science works. You got to have the data. You got to do your research. In this case, he and his colleagues hit the ground and were going around interviewing people and looking at the neighborhoods and finding out where the water came from that filled up their wells, where they got their water, and that sort of thing. So that shows you how science works. It's a long chapter. This is the main thing that you have to do this week. I like to tell my students about this chapter. You know, a scientist like me did not write this chapter. Somebody else wrote it, but it's really good. It's really good, very interesting. I love it. But it is long. It is long, and there are plenty of questions to go along with it. So just so you know, chapter 2 is the longest one in the whole textbook. But we're trying to show you how science works through this example. All right, then for your topic. You are going to choose a research question to ask about your topic. So say you chose electric cars. So what's a question that comes to your mind when you think of that topic? Electric cars, electric cars. Wonder how green they actually are. I wonder if there are any issues surrounding the batteries that are used in electric cars. I wonder if our power grid can support so many new electric vehicles as we try to phase out gasoline-powered cars. So this is just a few questions that you could come up with. So look at whatever your topic is. Go back and read that part in chapter 1 under your topic to see if you can come up with a good idea. You probably already have a good idea of something to ask. So you're going to develop a research question about your topic. before I move off this slide, this is dolphin strand feeding. They do this on purpose down on the coast of South Carolina, where I love to go. They herd schools of fish together. They work cooperatively, chase the fish up onto the shore. They always come up on their right sides, and then they grab the fish that are floundering around on the sand there and are flipping around in the air. So it's a very good, efficient way of fishing. All right, my tip of the week this week, these are puffins that I also saw in Scotland. That was on that same boat trip with the sea eagle. In fact, that sea eagle that I showed you in the beginning tried to catch one of these puffins. That's why it was so close to the boat and to the shore, because it was diving down to catch puffins to eat. And it knocked one of those silly puffins off the rocks, and it tumbled down a few rocks and got up and waddled back off. They're so doggone cute. Yeah, these are puffins in Scotland. So my tip of the week this week is to break your assignments into manageable pieces. Don't wait. Everybody does, though, at some point. Don't wait until the last minute, especially with this textbook chapter this week. You should break that up into sections. Read maybe 2 sections at a time, one day, and answer all the questions. Go in the next day, read a couple more. You'll see. It's easier, it's better to break it up into chunks, into manageable pieces to do every day, instead of waiting until the last minute and trying to rush through everything, including figuring out the research topic question that you're going to have to this week, because that's going to be very important moving forward. All right, I hope that you have a wonderful week this week. If you need anything, email me, m.sigmon, and I almost forget my name, m.sigmon@snhu.edu, and I will be glad to respond to you. So have a great week.